Hey guys, Randy Potato here to review the new relationship update patch for Darkest Dungeon 2. Overall, the overhaul to the relationship system is a breath of fresh air for the Darkest Dungeon 2 community, featuring less interruptions, less obnoxious RNG act-outs, and more dynamic relationships to make for more tactical and smoother gameplay. This is countered by a higher degree of RNG in the accumulation of affinity in the first place, and introducing a high degree of chance in the formation of relationships. The big change, of course, is relationships no longer persist throughout your run. They change from end to end with your team's shifting affinity. No longer having guaranteed relationships at the various threshold does introduce more RNG, but without the permanence and with the removal of most of the act-outs, you never feel either overwhelmed or overpowered in most situations. This is something most of the community has been asking for. RNG combat act-outs removed that either make zero sense, the kill stealing, for example, or ruined runs entirely. Amorous skill blocks. This mechanic of heroes having opinions on other heroes' actions remains, but is now telegraphed and only costs you affinity. With affinity now being a permanent 20 pip bar rather than mostly persistent relationships, affinity in-item value has increased, and they now retain their value throughout the entire run, creating more interesting and impactful decision-making moments in inventory management, which a lot of players have long disliked because of the time it takes, but I enjoy it for the strategic element. To compensate, Red Hook have added 2 base storage slots to assist in easier management. In addition, this makes all encounters important to boost your affinity even late game, except the mountain, which does add to the runtime, but again inserts more dynamic decision-making moments, though rolling bad encounters without real choices can be another set of awful RNG to endure. The new Blessed Curse system is fantastic and unintrusive, though in some cases I feel this update has brought relationships too far the other way, from intrusive to entirely unassuming and irrelevant if the relationship selects the wrong skills. Sometimes this creates moments where you'll equip a skill you normally wouldn't for the benefits, which is fun, but a lot of times it still doesn't make sense, and thus a major mechanic will go just untouched for full regions. The cursing system is quite good, forcing strategic choices to handle unwanted skills both being on your bar and your good skills becoming less powerful and sometimes entirely unusable. This is nowhere near as punishing, of course, as the old negative relationship act-outs, which is good because of the plethora of ways you can now roll negative relationships through no fault of your own. And finally, the drama of the Darkest Dungeon 1 virtue system is back in the form of Resolute and Meltdown. Unlike Darkest Dungeon 1, these are not persistent states, but rather instead, when reaching 10 stress, you have a singular moment of anticipation of whether or not your HP and affinity will be sent plummeting, or whether you will power through with a heal, affinity boost, and deathblow resist increase to turn the tides of your current fight. This change added much needed tension to high stress moments, swapping the famous meltdown spiral with a chance at redemption. Now, for the ugly side of this update, which hopefully the extended time and experimental will allow to be mended. My biggest complaint is the roadbarks, which occur largely at random, that completely trivialize even a full inventory of affinity in items. Even with low stress and no related negative quirks, your heroes can just lose 1 to 2 affinity at a time simply traveling, with no counterplay. Removing this much control from the player is maddening, considering relationships are already an RNG element now instead of a guarantee. These random barks, compounded by the deep reduction in combat act-outs that affect affinity, make stress management a lower priority, which some players will enjoy. The extremely obnoxious 4 stress threshold was quite stifling, but removes a huge strategic and thematic part of this series. To fix this, I suggest removing roadbarks under a certain threshold entirely, and more heavily weight and scale the road act-outs towards the stress system, while reducing the total number of roadbarks significantly. Next, on to quirks. While the new set of quirks that affect relationship chance are a good overall addition, creating more decision-making in whether you want to remove a combat-focused quirk or a relationship one, there are probably too many of them and their impact is too strong, especially since some, namely Braggart, can be spawned by using affinity items, with limited to no counterplay in some situations because of the sparse options and quirk removal, which I agree with. This can be remedied by further adjustments to the relationship proc rate. I would like to see max affinity now guarantee a positive relationship, regardless of quirks, as a reward for reaching this difficult threshold. I would also like to see negative relationship chance removed for the very friendly tranche, another quite difficult milestone to reach, or at least give 5 to 10% protection to block random negatives in all but the worst quirk situations. To add to this, because all runs start firmly in neutral, N1 has a high degree of RNG, rarely awarding you relationships but leaving open the possibility of more random negatives with no counterplay for your first region, which can be absolutely devastating, especially to newer players without unlocks just trying to get to the second inn for the candles. I would suggest a scaling effect, making neutral affinity 0% negative base chance at the first inn, so only proccing negative with a bad quirk, and increase the neutral chance at each subsequent inn to punish players that maintain neutrality. And finally, as incredible as the new Resolute and Meltdown system is, with persistent relationships, Meltdowns are much less punishing in the mountain and against the boss now. While Meltdowns were often less punishing in this scenario, they're now often at the point of irrelevance. To balance the incredible buff for Resolute, Meltdown should also come with debuffs, either to Deathblow resist as a mirror to Resolute, or with Blind, Weak, and Vuln token application, which would also fit thematically. In the same vein, giving your hero positive tokens on Resolute could create some very interesting tactical decision-making regarding stress management in the endgame. Overall, this update moves this game in the right direction as we advance towards full release, tightening up the affinity and relationship proc rate, and further eliminating some of the worst and least counterable RNG elements of the system would fix the most controversial element of Darkest Dungeon 2. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I post new content every day.